Hey guys, it's Wyatt Claypool here, back in Calgary after helping out in the BC provincial election for the Conservatives, an election that we still don't know the winner of because we have 49,000 mail-in ballots and provisional ballots left to count. The good news is that there are two very tight ridings that the NDP are only barely leading in, and the mail-in ballots look like they will be leaning towards the Conservatives, so the Conservatives could either get a minority government or a majority government. Yes, the NDP might still be able to hold their one seat lead, but you never know. In politics, absolutely anything can happen, and I guess there at least is some entertainment value in that. But since I'm back in the nicer studio in Calgary and no longer sitting on that horrible black leather couch, I want to talk a little bit more about BC politics. And this interview with Conservative Party leader John Rustad is too hauntingly funny to watch. This is hilarious. John Rustad demolishes the CBC News interviewer. I don't even know who this is. I should honestly check who this is. But this was just an awful interview. This was just a knives out interview from a legacy media journalist trying to score points so that everyone in the fashionable, I guess, legacy media circles will give him a pat on the back. This is a guy, I just got off the phone with someone today who said that the guy interviewing John Rustad here truly sees himself as like Canadian 60 Minutes. No, he's neutral, but he's hard hitting. Watch some of these answers, these questions and answers, and tell me if this feels like a fair interview or this guy's just a partisan hack trying to get one over on John Rustad. But John Rustad just fought in an entire provincial election campaign, and he's probably at his sharpest right now and does not take any sort of nonsense from this terrible CBC interviewer. I can't find his name, but I feel like it's not really worth knowing his name.
3 of 4 seats in Richmond. What does that tell you?
Well, Richmond, both Richmond and Surrey, really, when you look at what the Conservative vote represented, it was pretty much, rural BC, but also a lot of ethnic minorities, whether it's Chinese Canadians or Indo-Canadians. And so a lot of those groups came together and said, they had enough, whether it was the drugs and crime problems, whether it was SOGI that's going to our schools. There was a lot of things that were driving people that wanted to see change.
Before we get to the CBC News host saying one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life, I do want to just comment on what John Rustad just said there, because it is quite funny that the Conservatives are truly the diverse party in British Columbia. And I'm not just talking about, ethnic diversity, that we have a lot of South Asian and Indo-Canadian supporters. Like we have a lot of Chinese and South Asian supporters. But we actually have geographical diversity. I saw this post someone made the other day saying that the rest of BC wants Vancouver to get its crap together, which is kind of true. The Conservatives only got one Vancouver riding unless things shake out with these mail-in ballots a little bit differently and we pick up Lingara. But, it is true that the thing is that the base of the BC NDP is very white, has a lot of arts degrees, do not own property, tend to rent, and they are very reliant on legacy media for their news. But if you go outside of Vancouver, Conservative Party supporters are all kinds of people: suburban, tradespeople, business owners, people who are living on lower incomes, upper income levels, everywhere, rural, semi-rural, the Fraser Valley, farmers, people, electricians, tradespeople, everybody could be a conservative, where the NDP are actually a very narrow band of a type of voter, and they just happen to have very good numbers in the right ridings to keep themselves whole. Yes, they have slightly won the popular vote, but that only really tells you that they have a lot of money, so their turnout operation is much better funded than the BC Conservatives, who, just based on election rules, were having to run their campaigns with like $5 and a ham sandwich. And they beat some of these incumbents who were maxing out their spending. And some of these conservatives who beat them were spending like a third of what they did. It was crazy. But here is the CBC host now trying to make a fool of himself in record time.
So I mean, drugs and crime and SOGI are two ways to scare people, basically.
Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily, but parents are very concerned about their kids. They're concerned about their own safety. And
sure, but is there anything to it? But I don't want to get into it because we do every time, but really, is there anything to fear from SOGI? Really?
Well, when your 6-year-old boy, his grandson, comes home and sitting at the dinner table and saying, Grandpa, is it okay that I'm a boy? At 6 years old, should they really be asking those questions?
Why not? Why wouldn't they ask a question?
Why not? Why not? Why should they? This is leftist nihilism. And throughout this entire interview, you will notice that this host is just full of nihilistic views on politics. You just cognitive dissonance all the way through. When I say nihilism, he's just like, who cares? And he'll go on and say, well, it's might be bad now, but this has always been a problem, even though it's obviously way worse now. He's just basically throwing his hands up in the air. Who cares? Because this guy truly just wants the NDP to have its toys in the sandbox and not the conservatives. It doesn't matter if the conservatives might be right on the issues, know what they're talking about, and they can make things better. Well, shouldn't kids be talking about what gender they are at 6 years old? No, they shouldn't. No, they shouldn't. And this is a prime example of why South Asians in Surrey voted for the Conservatives. Yes, the NDP might have cleared more than half the ridings still, but the problem is, again, that all the poll projections showed that the Conservatives shouldn't have had a chance at any of these Surrey ridings, at least outside of the South, and they were clobbering them. In the North, they smashed the NDP education minister because her own community, because she was a South Asian candidate herself, doesn't like SOGI. And the thing is that they can tell you that they don't like it. And I think that John Rustad has a great answer here when he basically pushes back on the idea that, well, who should care? Well, the parents are telling you they care.
Question.
Well, that's a question I think that the electorate looks at and says, they don't find that acceptable. When you look at also, quite frankly, the pornography that is in our schools.
There is no pornography involved in the SOGI program. There is no pornography in the SOGI program. And I don't want to go through this again because we go through it every time. But let's.
It's almost like he's wrong every single time. And John has to correct you. And what he's going to do here is this stupid bait and switch. We're going to see it in real time. The idea, oh, it's not happening. Oh, well, it's not part of the curriculum. Well, it's in libraries, but you don't have to. But so it's in libraries, and it's a mandated book that public schools must have. These gender identity books, I forget what the actual names of them are, but you shouldn't even, adults shouldn't look at these books. You would think so an adult was creepy for looking at this stuff, and 10-year-olds can read it? No, that's obviously insane. That's why a lot of these socially conservative groups did not vote for the NDP, or maybe only voted for them out of ignorance, because there was a lot of BC NDP candidates in Surrey going around saying, oh, of course I'm against SOGI. And they're going to now vote in favor of it again. I could see actually some BC NDP candidates, some MLAs in Surrey, crossing the floor, because if now they're gonna the Conservatives force them to vote yay or nay on SOGI, they're gonna look like complete morons in front of their morons and liars in front of their communities, who they've reassured, oh yeah, I think SOGI's gone too far and I'm gonna do something about it.
Let's also talk about the crime and drug factor too, because you're in Richmond warning them against what you are calling drug dens. There are no supervised consumption sites in Richmond.
So first of all, let's actually show the books that are being made available in our schools on your.
Perfect thing John Rustad's doing, he's not letting this weasel, frankly, try and side skirt the issue. Oh, we talk about it every time and you're wrong. He's just trying to project, hey, John's wrong, but let's move on to the next topic. And John's holding him in place and slowly beating him to death with the facts.
Your television show, and to see what kind of ratings you get with that.
That are being made available
that are being made on your television show. Let's actually show the books that are being made available in our schools on your television show, and to see what kind of ratings you get with that.
That are being made available in our schools.
Made available
right,
in our
they're
schools.
Not part of a curriculum.
They came from the SOGI initiative, which is not a curriculum. It is a philosophy that has been brought to schools. But when it comes to what's going on in Richmond, there is housing units that have been put in where drug consumption is being allowed. There was safe injection sites which were proposed to come into Richmond that we said, no, we will not allow that to happen.
Drug consumption takes place in every neighborhood in this province.
Another pivot from this guy, just pivoting constantly. John said, yes, there might be no safe injection site in Richmond, but there are a lot of these subsidized housing units for people who are addicts, who are allowed to smoke crack and inject drugs in these areas, and it's creating a crime problem in these communities. Oh, no drug dens. And now he's pivoting again. The weasel himself is pivoting, saying, well, people use drugs everywhere. What kind of nihilist are you to not be able to see the difference between people using drugs illegally in places that they shouldn't be using them, and the government letting you use drugs in subsidized apartment buildings that just become drug sale centers. That, like, we've heard in many of these, like, Canada's Dying and Vancouver's Dying documentaries, people who are trying to get clean, and they are then like, they are given apartment units in these housing centers. They get a house or an apartment, and like 5 minutes later they get a knock on their door and their neighbor wants to sell them heroin. And it's hard to stay off drugs when you're around people offering you drugs all the time. Oh my goodness. This is an advertisement on why the CBC should be defunded.
In rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods all over this province, people are consuming drugs.
So talk to the families that live in an area where one of these housing units have come in, and ask them about what's happened with the drugs and the crime within their neighborhoods, particularly when it's close to a school or playground. And take a look at these places.
People should be afraid, then, is what you're saying.
People are afraid when you see the drugs and crime happening in their neighborhood.
Right.
You know, there's random.
What was that kind of thing? So you're saying people should be afraid, as if like Rustad's like wishing bad feelings on people, and he's not describing the current state of things.
The random things going on. You seem to think that it is okay for this to be happening everywhere in the province. I do not believe that's true.
I don't believe it's. I don't believe it's okay either. But what I'm saying,
you're making excuses all over the place for it. What is this? What is this? This guy thinks he's 60 Minutes, apparently. What is this? Just basically saying, well, the problem always has existed, ergo we shouldn't even bother thinking of what's better. I like the term better because I want things to be better. This guy just says, well, as long as one person's injecting drugs, that's basically like the East Hastings situation we have, where it's turned into Shutter Island.
Saying is, you know, when people are looking at the issues that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, blowing things out of proportion, taking single incidents that are terrible incidents and trying to turn those into the norm is not necessarily helpful. The evidence shows that overall crime is down. The evidence shows.
Okay, I'm just going to say, I have my master's degree with a research paper specifically studying crime. I hate this when people in the media say crime's down. Crime is not down. And John's about to actually add something I didn't even think of when I was initially listening to this, and saying that the problem is that the police don't even log things as crimes anymore because they know that they're never going to get the charge, because it's only often considered a crime once the charge is laid. And right now we have record crime. But if you take 2024 numbers and you line them up against 2023 numbers, crime went down 4.5%. Okay, but for the past 3 or 4 years, it went up 5%, then 7%, then 10%. Then it went down up by 2%, and now it came down by 4%. But we're still way up from where we were 10 years ago. That is the actual problem. I hate this when people say, crime went down 12% last year. But car thefts, the previous were up 40%. So it's gone down 12%. But that still doesn't mean that we're back to where it was when it was not that big of a deal. It is obviously a big deal, and you can turn everything into an anecdote. This guy got his hand chopped off in Vancouver or whatever city by like an addict with a machete. Oh, that's an anecdote. And we can turn thousands of these instances that happen every single year of people being assaulted, attacked, or having their businesses shut down because they're just surrounded by addicts and they can't have normal customers come and patronize them anymore. Well, that's an anecdote. Everything's technically an anecdote if we make it an anecdote. Goodness.
That stranger attacks are down. The evidence shows.
So Stephen, I would challenge you on that, and the reason why I would challenge you on is this: talk to the police about it. And the problem
police
is,
will tell you the crime is down overall. That stranger attacks are down.
The police will tell you that it's down because they can't lay charges because there's no point. Charges are not going through. So many crimes are going without charges being laid. There's a reason why. For example, Save on Foods has hired 345 security guards around the province, and it's not because it's not because they suddenly think that they need those jobs. It's because they've got problems. They've got crime. They've got drugs coming. They got the things, stuff being stolen out of the stores.
Right.
Their staff are not feeling safe. This is what is going on in our communities.
Could it
Talk
be
to the
because
small businesses.
Could it be because people can't afford to eat?
What just like a goblin sitting here interviewing Rustad. Maybe it's because people can't afford to eat. Maybe that's why they're stealing. That's not why people steal. This was actually the specific subject of my master's research paper. Crime drives poverty more than poverty drives crime. There are neighborhoods in Toronto right beside each other, pretty much. Same type of infrastructure in the area, same type of mix of suburban and urban living options. The area with a higher median income can sometimes have a 6 to 7 times higher crime rate than the other one, even because the place with high crime has high amounts of single parent households and low bachelor degree achievement rates. It doesn't mean you need a bachelor's degree to succeed. Obviously, trade degrees are great, but usually when it's only like 18% of people are getting a bachelor degree compared to the average in Toronto of 44%, that's usually telling you that there's just not interest in education in that area. And that drives up crime. When you have low social responsibility factors at play, you can go to the other places where they're very lower median incomes. Those people are never going to commit a crime. They have very strong families and they have a strong value on education and the idea that if you are determined and you are diligent, that you can be successful. That's what's going on here. I hate this stupid talking point. People are committing crimes because we haven't cut them big enough checks. Do you know that after the 2008 housing crisis in the United States, crime went down for the next 3 or 4 years? Because it has nothing to do with poverty. It has to do with people, whether or not they can actually stop themselves from committing crime. In theory, we've all been getting wealthier than those who were around 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago. Crime was very low in the 60s and the years before that. Because again, it has to do with whether or not you have the values not to commit crime and instead work. And what we keep doing with all these programs where we give people more money almost as a bribe not to commit crime is we are incentivizing bad behavior all over the place. Oh, but my goodness, I almost need to, I'm going to screenshot this right as we're sitting here because this is such a dweeby looking face from this guy. Oh my goodness. Again, I keep saying this is truly one of the worst interviews I've ever seen in my life.
Talk to the small businesses where things are walking out of their stores on a regular basis and how difficult it is. Look at how many businesses are closed down now. People are not going downtown anymore because they're not feeling safe. This is what is out there in our society today, and it should not be trivialized and become normal.
I'm not trivializing it at all. I'm saying that you see the world in a very particular way.
It's a logical way, actually. Like, if you are so concerned with people not having enough money, and that's why they're committing crime, which is the most infantilizing perspective on crime possible. They're committing crime because we didn't pay them off enough. How about we lower their taxes? How about we clear up regulations so it's easier to hire employees so that businesses have more money at the end of the day to pay people so that they can lower prices because they don't need. Maybe we should crack down on crime so that Save on Foods can lower prices because they don't need 2 or 3 security guards per location. That's an idea. This is tens of thousands of dollars of extra measures that they need to be able to protect their product and their customers. And that's being added to the price of food. Get rid of the carbon tax. Get rid of tons of different taxes, and you'll actually make it more livable. But you also need to crack down on crime. But this guy would probably be someone who thinks that it's racist that certain people are more disproportionately locked up than others.
In a way that's a dangerous, awful place. That's it. And I don't know that everybody sees it that way.
Everybody may not see it that way, but I can tell you something. Were there tons of tent cities all over the house 7 years ago? No, all over the city? No, I mean, the province? No, there wasn't. Those are popping up. Was there people doing drugs all over the place? No, it was more limited in various areas. Now there's drugs all over, for example,
there were 10
downtown
cities
Vancouver.
all over. There were 10 cities all over Vancouver 20 years ago when they built the Woodwards building. There were 10 cities at Science World. There were 10 cities in Victoria.
They were not all over the place. No,
well,
they weren't.
There have been 10 cities around for a very long time.
There have been, but not to the same level. They proliferated all.
You can even just see, and I don't want to become one of these like body language experts who are like, he wiggled his nose a little bit. That must mean he committed a crime. But like even just the body language of the interviewer has been getting more and more closed in and more awkward as the interview's gone on because he's uncomfortable because John Rustad is making him look like a fool and pushing back on him hard. And he's looking more frustrated because he's used to conservative politicians or BC liberal politicians in the past coming in and cowering in front of his questions, trying to be nice to the interview host. Don't be nice to people who are like this. This guy is like a goblin. He is out to get John Rustad, and John's not playing into it.
All over the communities. I mean, you just drive down the highway 1, you'll see them here and there and everywhere now. Those were never there 7 years ago.
I understand. Let's talk about the election, and I do apologize for getting sidetracked there, but The
Even John's smiling because he knows he got the guy, and now he wants to move on and talk about the election. Because this guy would love to keep hammering on John Rustad if he thought he had a point. He doesn't, and that's why he's just wanting to move on. Let's talk. Oh, let's get back to the election after I tried to embarrass you and then was embarrassed myself.
when you talked about in your speech about how you want to take on the NDP at the first opportunity. Would you like to see another election as soon as possible?
My hope is, come Saturday, that the Conservative Party will have the opportunity to form a government.
Of course.
That's my hope. And so we'll see what comes out of that. Should we still be in the minority situation, we will be looking and working with other MLAs, Green Party or others, to look at an opportunity to be able to govern in this province. Should we end up in a situation where there's a minority government of the NDP that is in power in British Columbia, if they're carrying forward with the policies that they are promising to do, which have brought so much destruction and pain in this province, especially to our resource sector in British Columbia, then no, I cannot support that, and I will try to bring their government down at the earliest possible opportunity.
Okay.
I think that's a good place to end it off there. I know that really wasn't in the vein of how bad the interview was towards the end, but it does set me up to talk about a little bit of the strategy of the BC Conservatives in potentially negotiating how to run a minority government if they only have 46 seats. I actually think there is an opportunity either for an NDP floor crosser to come over to the Conservatives, especially a South Asian MLA who cannot vote for SOGI and actually have respect in their community, or I think there actually is an option. Ooh, sorry, I keep banging this on the table. I'm actually a fairly tall person, which people sometimes don't expect in real life because I look like I'm short. I keep banging my legs against my table and it rumbles everything. And then I have a tendency to also put my hand on the microphone. So in the past, if you ever hear all this like thumping and crap, that's because I'm like sitting here holding the microphone and like vibrating on the table. But the thing with the Greens is I actually think there is an opportunity to work with the Greens. If you know who these Green MLAs that were elected are, these are old school Andrew Weaver Greens. Both of them are men who were not in the Green Party caucus this last election. Either the old Green MLAs lost re-election like Sonia Furstenau, or they moved on. And these two guys are kind of like old school, more so 90s trade unionist type people. Not trade unionists, more just union green guys. So if we have certain community approaches to healthcare or whatever that lines up with them, we might be able to make deals with the Greens depending on the piece of legislation up. And I think that that's classically the way that you actually do minority governments, is that you put up things for a vote and you see if you can get buy-in from the other parties. And I'm just going to lay cards on the table of how I think the Conservatives should do this, because it will be very obvious if they do it the way I suggest, that what you do, you just keep putting up vote after vote after vote on getting rid of SOGI, getting rid of the provincial carbon tax, getting rid of safe supply, putting in place a new rehab program, putting more police on the streets. Keep putting out votes with this stuff and keep watching either the Greens or the NDP. Keep voting it down and looking like complete simpletons that they don't understand what the voters of BC want. Because they can say, well, they want us because they voted for us. They voted for you guys because you have a strong party machine. But if this was actually a fair race where the Conservatives had as much taxpayer money as the NDP had, the BC Conservatives would have blown them out. In fact, just because of some independents running specifically to trip up the Conservatives should have won about 49, 52 seats. Like, Vernon Lumby, you have places like Richmond Stevenson, where there was just incumbents running purely to mess over the Conservatives. Oceanside Ladysmith, that was another one. Brett Fee should have easily had that, but an independent basically ran as the real alternative to the NDP, knowing that they were never going to win, and then just trying to make sure that Brett Fee wouldn't win, maybe because he wants to be the candidate next time. I don't think so. Regardless, but I think that should be the Conservative strategy going forward, going out to the voters saying, we want to get rid of the carbon tax, we want to do this, and let the NDP justify to voters why they won't let tax relief happen, why we can't lower income taxes, why we can't shift money from the administration side of healthcare to the actual frontline side so we can have more nurses and doctors working. Keep doing that and keep making them not look like complete fools by voting for the dumbest, like voting against the most common sense pieces of legislation possible. Anyways, that should be it for me today, guys. If you like this channel and you like my videos, if you're not yet subscribed, make sure you do subscribe, like this video, leave me comments on anything that you want me to potentially fix about the set, any topics you want me to talk about. Sorry, I keep bumping the table. I'm going to get better at that. I maybe need a table that has more accommodation for my legs down here. It's always a work in progress. But anyways, so I'll be back with more videos. I'm going to be able to put out way more diverse content now that I'm back in my normal studio, and I can, like, do whiteboard videos. I can do stuff in regards to other elections going on around the country. There's a lot of stuff going on with whether or not Justin Trudeau is going to actually survive as the Liberal Party leader. I think there's actually either a small chance he gets thrown out, or at least he gets damaged so much by the attempted ouster by certain members of his caucus that he ends up sinking himself into the pits and he cannot come back in the 2025 election. I actually have to give Justin Trudeau credit on something, oddly enough. He actually is pursuing lowering temporary foreign workers and students even more. Good on him. Way too late. This is not me giving him forgiveness because he's not asked for it and he's not actually turning over a new leaf. He's just trying to save himself. But that demonstrates how much the conversation on mass immigration has changed in Canada, that even the Liberals are having to run as immigration restrictionists now. Okay. Anyway, so that's truly the end of this video, guys. See you later. Yeah, like, share, and subscribe. Do all that stuff. Donate to the legal fund in the description below or pinned at the top of the comments if you want. And I'll see you guys in the next video.